Hi everyone, I am sitting here with one of my designs that's in the September issue of Color On magazine, and I wanted to show you something. I'm using water-based markers to color this. This is just flimsy printer paper, so it's not a super fancy art piece or anything. I'm just doing it for fun, but I wanted to show you something that I've noticed about water-based markers. This particular set of markers that I'm using, they're by Maped. They're a 0.4 millimeter, so fine point marker, and I love them for getting into small spaces. They work really well. But I wanted to show you something. So here in this section, you'll notice that the blue looks pretty streaky, which is common for water-based markers. It's very difficult a lot of times for people to get that streak-free finish. But if you look over here at this section, it looks very good. It doesn't look streaky at all. And that's because of a property of using water-based markers. And I'm going to show you how to get this streak-free finish, which obviously the green isn't, but this blue is nice and the red is nice. I left some areas streaky so that you could see the difference. And I am going to show you right now, by coloring a section, how I do this. I'm setting this up to stay still here, hopefully, and then we'll get going. I'm going to color this section here because you can see that. Now when coloring coloring a smaller area, it's usually fairly easy to get that streak-free look. But this is a larger area, and you'll notice as I'm coloring it that it does have those streaks of light and dark blue. I'll tell you the reason for that. There's nothing wrong in the way you're coloring. There's nothing wrong with the marker, although some markers are worse than others at doing this. And you want a good quality marker if you want to do this without your paper disintegrating. But the reason you get streaks is because the paper is not getting evenly saturated with color. So the areas that appear lighter have some of the white from underlying layers of the paper showing through. Little tiny specks of it, but it's enough to change the color of the ink. I'm not going to go any further here with this because we don't need to do the whole section for you to see what I'm talking about. But as you can see, this is looking streaky. But what you do is you come back and you color over it a second time. And I know at some point while I'm doing this, you're going to look at what I'm doing and you're going to say, Mary, it looks even worse. There's some sections now that look really bad, really dark, and almost look like the paper's coming apart. And other sections don't look that bad. Well, that's just because it's wet. And wet paper tends to do weird things like that. As long as you're not doing it hard enough, if you don't have some markers have a kind of a very almost scratchy feel to them, and those, you will when you have wet paper like this. It could actually ruin the paper. Or some are really wet markers, and that'll do the same thing. But as long as you don't have something like that happening, you should be okay. I have had papers and markers where I've had to do this 2 or 3 times to get rid of all the streaks. And usually if 2 isn't enough, you do want to let the paper dry out quite a bit before you do that third layer, because with every successive layer you're getting the paper wetter and wetter, and so there's more chance of ripping the paper if you get it too wet. But usually 2 layers, you're not going to have that problem if you've got a good marker. And I'm doing a second section while I wait for this one to dry a bit. But it really is very simple, because it's just a matter of going back over the ink a second time, or back over the paper a second time, to get more of that ink saturating the paper. And once you have the paper fully saturated, you're going to see, number one, you're going to see no streaking, but number two, you're going to see the true color of the ink as it's intended, because there's no white. You know, just like you added white to red to get pink, without that white, you're getting just the red, or in this case, just the blue. So it's the actual color of the ink that was placed in the pen. So there you go. I've gone over the whole thing twice now. I'm going to get close up so you can see what it looks like. Now if you look at that top section, you'll see it still does have some areas where it looks a little different. Those areas are just still a little wet compared to the others, but you'll notice that the streaking isn't there anymore. And the same for this. This is going to look much darker because it's more new and it's still drying. But again, you don't see that streaking like you saw with the first layer. So there you have it. And I'm going to mention these again. Maped was kind enough to send these to me for review for free. And of course, I always like getting stuff in for review because it's fun to play with. But in this particular case, these have kind of become my go-to markers for fine point markers because I really like them. They, for me, are pretty much equivalent to the Staedtler FineLiners that I use. I'll use the two of those interchangeably. So there we go. Maped Graph'Peps, they're called. You can get them on Amazon. I'll put a link in the video. And let's see how far this is dried now. It focuses. Yeah, see, you've got a nice streak-free finish coming up there as it dries. There you go. Streak-free coloring with water-based markers. See y'all next time.